that. So ask and continue, apologize for that. I would like us to go ahead and vote on, there's a lot of momentum. I think I know how the vote's going to go anyways, but I would like us to vote on continuing. So unless you've already voted, there's probably a little window up on your screen says extend the topic, no preference, or end the topic. So if you haven't voted about continuing, we'll go ahead and do that now. 4, 5, 6. I think we've got everybody in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I don't know if we've all voted, but extend the topic already has the majority. So I'm going to open this up for, we'll do another 3 minutes or so. And as you see, I'm not a complete taskmaster when it comes to that. So
and I apologize for talking so much. I want to say something and then I want to stop talking because I tend to do too much of it. I'm sorry. But if we can ignore last year, the COVID year, it was a one-off. And I think if we talk about our strategies and ignore it, that might help. And I do know that years ago, say 20 years ago, member meetings were so much more popular. And nowadays it is hard to get people. Nobody wants to leave the house. It's really hard to drag people away. And for what it's worth, and we're a process organization, okay? So all these quality people are big on learning new processes. So we can include tours in our meetings as some of the types of meetings that we have where we go to a place and we see how their processes are in action. So if we've combined not just a meeting with a presenter, but an activity, and the best ones where we get the biggest turnout is when we go to a brewery to see their tour.
We can't.
Well, and that's where I think I'll agree to disagree a little bit on that, because really the brewery, if you're being honest, is more about the social aspect than about the processes.
That is true. And you got to keep the members after they show up. You're right.
And I will say that we've seen the complete opposite. Our members were so sick and tired of being behind a camera that the minute we started going back in person, we have as much, if not more, participation now than we ever have. I did a member reception, which is simply networking, and it was after hours, so it wasn't during the workday, and we had well over 80 people. So I think part of it may depend on what is it they're expecting to get out of that particular membership. If your team is looking to get that industry specific information, then I would agree. I would be in the same boat. I need to be, if I'm going to allocate that time, I need it to be valuable. But if you're like us and a large percentage of your membership is sales and development people, it's a numbers game for them. The more bodies they can get in front of, the better opportunity they have to meet the people that they need to. So I think it goes both ways, but I would say, at least in our experience, people are so sick of being behind cameras. They're finding every opportunity they can to get in front of people now.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm hearing is catering to the needs of your members, right? So these two things that you're saying, both Trisha and Teg, you're saying different things, but you're saying you're catering to the needs of your specific members.
Yeah. Well, and we have to do both because we are so broad. To Patricia's point, I mean, there are those that we have to be very, I wouldn't say industry specific, but there have to be topic specific. So that's where we have to focus on like the education side of it for some events. Others are social, others are, so, I mean, but again, it's hard because when I talk in groups like this, we have an entire team devoted to it. And in many cases, when I'm talking in groups like this, you're usually talking about teams or associations, organizations with much smaller teams and or volunteer opportunities. So that's where I kind of have to break it down into their own little buckets to try to be as relevant as possible. But I agree. You're having to try to to fit a lot of different needs all at one time.
Mhm.
All right, so the clock ran out. We're invite all of you to vote again, whether we extend, wrap it up, or in the middle, don't care if we go on. So we can do this as many times as you'd like, or as few times as you like, because you guys own the agenda. All right, so so the votes are in. It looks like we've run this one out for today, for the time being. So I'm going to go ahead and move this, how do you retain members, over to discussed. And I guess this is the other end of that question from Tricia is, okay, in addition to the members you retain, what do you do to find new members?
Yes.
So Tricia, get us started, please.
Well, over the years, I've had thoughts about this, but the people that I serve with don't often agree with me and my ideas. And that's, having events and finding a way to publicize them to people that wouldn't normally know you're doing anything. And so we've tried some event calendars. We ask people in our groups to share with others, but I just feel like maybe there's more we can do. And also, I guess if you want to think about that along the way, I think we all are seeing the issue where most of the members are older. So how are you attracting younger members?
Mhm.
I'll throw this out just because as a regional organization, I see Scott's on the call, and Scott, I believe you work with Truist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So as an example, like in Scott's case, Truist is one of our strategic partners.
Didn't know
Olga,
that.
we partner with Olga. And the reason I throw this out there is because for a lot of those that we partner with, one thing I've really tried to do more is I grew up in a business climate where membership organizations tended to stay in their own silos. So we all kind of saw ourselves as competing for the same members to a small extent. So we never really seemed to overlap because we were always afraid that if we put our members in front of somebody else, they'd steal them away. And I'll tell you, in the last 3 years, I've done the complete opposite as membership director at the chamber. I've actually gotten more involved, whether it's with the Hotel Association, Restaurant Association, Volunteer Hampton Roads. The more involved we've gotten with those types of associations, the more it's actually helped get the word out about not only our organization, but theirs. And what we find is that those partnerships actually become more valuable for the participants. So when I'm looking for a new board member, I go to the organizations and the people that are most active because I know those are the people that give up their time. They are that 10% that are usually the ones willing to give of that. So my big thing is partnerships. And the more you can do that, the more you're getting to the right people. To your point, Patricia, instead of just throwing event notices out and hoping people show up.
Right. Yeah,
Totally
good thoughts.
agree.
Yeah, I mean, I'm part of Hampton Roads ISPI, and we've partnered with Vance Kinsey of ASQ for stuff too. I know we've done that in the past, so you probably know who Vance is. He's outgoing also.
And I've been to some of your meetings. Yes.
Yeah, so it's that kind of thing. That's a good thing to remember, Tage. It's like that people will be part of two different groups just because it's a builder. Yeah, that's a good best practice. Thanks.
Another thing we found is to have something of interest for the person. For example, I joined the Civic League because I was interested in a program they were doing about flooding in the neighborhood. And that was an issue that I had. And we found that other people, even now, I have a lady that's interested in joining because there's trash in her neighborhood and we're dealing with how to get that cleaned up. So if you have something that, the person is concerned about, that also helps to draw them in and get participation, because our issue is we get people to join and then they don't come to the meetings or they don't do anything. So, as far as being involved in the process. So sometimes it's making sure you're dealing with whatever issues the person has.
Good.
If I could, what Addie and, everybody's saying, Tay hit this and Tricia, of course. The more you're able to do that personal ask to join, or at least come and visit and learn more, it's so much more effective. Obviously, it's a little more time consuming, a little more resource and effort consuming, but that personal ask, the return on that is so much greater than the email or LinkedIn post and into the blind, and hopefully somebody stumbles across it. In those cases, particularly with social media, and social media is valuable, but you are competing with the entire world for their attention as opposed to that personal ask. All right, clock's up for the first part of this discussion. Time for everybody to vote and say, do we continue on this path? All right, and Suzanne stepped out. Well, 2 for ending, 1 for extending, 2 don't care. So let's call a wrap to this one, at least for now, and we'll move on to the next one. I forgot to mention this earlier while I'm getting set up on the next one. So our, any notes, of course, you have are yours, to keep. You will get on Friday a little wrap up of this, some resources, the link, the Zoom chat. Not that there's anything interesting in it right now, as well as a system generated document that says, well, here's the things that we did cover, that we captured in Lean Coffee. So we're not typing any discussion because that's kind of awkward and unnecessary for the small group. So I just want to let you know that there is some follow-up stuff that you'll get on Friday for this. So I've started the next one that Addie put in there. How do you manage members who do not want to change from tradition? So Addie, can you get us rolling on this, please?
When people have been together for a long time and worked well together, it's difficult for them to see new ways to do things or new patterns to do things. And sometimes it's like hitting a wall, trying to get them to see, can we try something different? Can we do this a different way? Because a lot of times when a new person comes in and everything is already set and we're not going to do anything different, it kind of turns them off because they're not familiar with the old traditions or the older people that have been there, because those who've been there for a long time, they all know each other and have developed a relationship. But now you've got a new person coming in and they don't feel like part of the group.
Thoughts?
I would think that just the experience of the last 18 months would be a good prod to sort of change some ways, because we've had to change, right? Although I suppose you could argue like, oh my God, that was terrible, let's go back to how we did things. You can argue it both ways. But for us, I think at Volunteer Hampton Roads, we found that because that a gathering on Zoom of some of our members was more well received, because the people that come don't have the flexibility that executives have, right? We're talking about volunteer coordinators, people that don't have the flexibility to be like, all right, I'm off to a networking meeting and then be gone for 2 hours, allowing for travel, but they can have a Zoom meeting online. And that was something that we discovered because of COVID, right? It allowed us a little bit of experimentation.
Are you talking about membership as a whole or through like leadership, say with a board?
No, we have a new, we're calling it Nonprofit Connect.
Yeah.
And it it is a time to learn about specific topics, but also to just connect with different organizations. And so we find valuable people that are like, oh, I didn't know you did that. And so they connect and collaborate, you know, but they're members of our organization. Small groups, a little bit bigger than this, but people that normally would not have come to, say, a location for an hour meeting, you know.
Yeah. Addie, with your group or your ask, are you talking membership as a whole, or the board, the leadership that's driving the decisions?
Probably more the leadership, but it affects both groups.
My only recommendation there is it's slow and steady. I mean, I oversee 5 division boards. So we have volunteer leadership boards in each of the 5 Southside cities. And there are just simply times where, and I won't name cities, but where leadership has been the same leadership, I mean, for what seems like a decade. And it's just knowing, having a strategic plan as to who you want to bring into those leadership roles. And it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, I learned the hard way in a couple situations where I came in and thought this was the best way to go about doing it. And it's really what I found was the better way to go about doing it is you go find some like-minded professionals and start to get them worked into the board, and just to understand that it's going to take maybe a few board cycles to get it done until you get some of that new refreshing blood on that board and in those leadership roles to say, hey, we really do need to take a fresh set of eyes to how we're going about doing some of this. But it's definitely not an overnight thing. It's because as you said, there's too many ingrained feelings about how things have been done, and hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it's but it can happen. It's just it's got to take a while.
Yeah, we had lots of issues over the years, and a few times somehow leadership ended up being so assertive, I don't know what the best word for it is, that people were driven away.
Yes.
And I don't want to see that happen again. I mean, we have term limits on, which is supposed to help a little bit with that, but sometimes they just rotate the positions amongst each other, and so it doesn't ever really change. And I like the idea of reaching out and bringing people in who are going to help gradually. It's a personality thing. So much it's a personality thing.
I so agree.
Yeah.
I'm on the state board, and there are 4 meetings a year. I don't know how many board meetings you are talking about, and then each branch has board meetings. But we all have always been very, I've been on for a bit, and they very much like to meet together. That's one thing. And there are 3 meetings in person and 1 in the winter by Zoom or conference call. But yes, we had state meetings of all the membership, and indeed, Olga, the turnout on a video on a Zoom meeting was huge, and at the highest of what the in-person meetings had been. At the highest level, there had been some. And so I'm agreeing with everything that's said. And I think we all have to think about, one, making whatever management there is, it's got to be welcoming. I agree. I have seen branches that have problems because the president is really an unpleasant person to work with, and they start losing people seriously. And the same thing for a board. And so if you have a good one, you have to be very careful who you add, that it really works, that it is welcoming. It's one of the reasons people like to stay on a board and provide their time. But I think we're all going to be facing a major issue of how do we have in-person meetings because people do want to get together, and yet maybe at the same time provide parts of the program that would be broadcast to those who cannot come, who have not been able to come. And that's what we're talking about now.
And Addie, one way that you may be able to help with kind of that transition, and I've used this with the chamber. We have the Thrive organization, which is about 3,000 young professionals in the Hampton Roads community. We also have Lead Hampton Roads, which puts a class of 45 to 50 people through every year. Those are both great resources for professionals who are specifically looking to get involved in leadership roles. So one of the things we've done with Thrive, and it's, yes, it's kind of an affiliate of ours, but really any organization in Hampton Roads could reach out to them. They have 3,000 young professionals that are all active and looking to get involved. That is what we do, is we've actually offered to bring on each of our division boards a representative from the Thrive organization into the boards in order to, and the way we've done it is to basically say, look, so we as organizations prepared for the next generation of leaders in the Hampton Roads community. We would like to have this Thrive representative to sit on the board. So, and it doesn't really matter what the organization is, because usually you're just looking for young talent who can represent whatever it is, even if it's an industry specific organization. But even at the civic level, if you have a young professional who lives in that community and wants to get involved, and it's a great way that you can bring that young talent in without it feeling like you're stepping on one of the board members' toes by quote unquote replacing someone. You can even bring them on as an ex officio role. That way they're not technically a board member, but you can get the young talent in. But that's one way we've used to try to build some of the youth into our organizations or boards, without necessarily stepping, as you mentioned, on the toes of some of the old guard.
I also wanted to, I know we're out of time, I wanted to mention briefly two things. One, that normally when you want to change something, you have to step up and lead it, right? If you're trying, and I think that you have to be ready to do that if you believe in that change. And number two, that you just have to do bite size, right? So maybe you just change one little thing, one little focus, instead of like, listen, guys, we've been doing all of this wrong, right? Or we have to change everything. So that's it.
We've got time. There's like 2 votes out there. We're tied, leaning towards ending the topic. We'll just see what that last vote looks like. But I would like to just share something on this topic that ties together a lot of what we've heard here. Even though you said you want to end the topic, I still have the master control. So I'm just going to suck it up for a minute here. Term limits, I think, are key. And this is for me looking at a lot of associations over a lot of years. Term limits that include a mandatory year off. So if it's two-year terms or whatever, you got to take a year off before you come back to the board. That I think helps spawn stuff. The other thing is we talked about, and I think Tricia mentioned this, and I've certainly seen it elsewhere, where the leadership is just kind of rotating. To me, that's not a healthy sign whatsoever. That's you go back to any total quality leadership or anything like that you want, but without that push to bring new people in, eventually you're just waiting your turn to make the same mistakes and drive members away. So to me, when I see that rotation, there's a real check on the health and vitality of the organization. Anyways, you guys said finish the topic, so I went on anyways. Last apology on that. We'll go ahead and press finish. And the next one up here is from Olga. How do you manage trainings, allowing for new members and others that know it all, like me? Thanks, Olga. You just busted me.
I think, so as a volunteer organization, volunteer management is always what we need to focus on. But you can only say so much about that, right? And you're talking to people who are already working in that environment, but you have to balance that with the fact that I think very few of us go into the professional life, the professional world saying, you know what, I'm going to be a volunteer coordinator. We sort of all land there through different ways. And so most of the time when we do it the first time, we are like, okay, I hope this works. So just, when you do a training, how do you balance those two things?
Are you talking about training the actual volunteer coordinator?
Well, so for us, pointers for volunteer management, trends, whatever it is that because for our organization, we have to, that is part of the added value, right? That you can receive trainings. And so some of them are like specifically for board members who are also volunteers, right? But some others are for our volunteer the volunteer coordinators or directors or whatever from the member organizations. So it might be very niche in this case, I don't know, because certainly, Tricia is not going to train anyone in quality control, right? I mean, that they're already trained. So, I mean, I'm willing to just move on if this is not something that applies to other people.
Well, do you all have kind of a standard handbook for that?
No, I mean,
here's the example I'll give. We have what we call ambassadors for the chamber. If you're an ambassador of the chamber, you have two responsibilities. One is they help us with retention. So as volunteers, they actually are willing to call our current members, reach out and just say, hey, are you doing okay? Is there anything the chamber could be helping you with? It's totally volunteer. The other thing that they do, because we host events, is that they're our volunteer workforce. Because as you know, I mean, we've only got so many people on staff. So when we host a 1,200 person event at the conference center, we got to get 1,200 people seated in 15 minutes. So they're there to help seat that. So what Michelle did, Michelle King, if you know her on a retention team, about 4 or 5 years ago, literally created a handbook for being an ambassador. So when they volunteer to be an ambassador for the chamber, the first thing she does is hand them the handbook and basically says, this is the outline of what your expectations are as an ambassador. So I'm wondering, could a volunteer, because the whole reason I got involved with Volunteer Hampton Roads was because of the exact same thing. I was a marketing director, and my boss, who, God bless her soul, gave a lot of money to organizations throughout Hampton Roads, but with that meant that somebody had to coordinate getting 10 people at an event dinner or volunteering for 2 hours one afternoon. That wasn't in my job description, but guess who got to organize that? So I was in that role. What would help with that type of thing is to be able, if I came to Volunteer Hampton Roads, or if I joined an association and they were able to say, here's kind of a short handbook on what those expectations are and kind of how you can work through this, knowing that it's not your primary job. I'm just thinking that might be an option. And I can get Michelle to send you what we do if you'd like to take a look at it. I mean, we're happy to share that.
Thanks, Tig.
Yeah.
So is that the type of training you were talking about? Because you were talking about new people as opposed to experienced people. Were you talking about them coming in as a leadership role or some other type of training?
I think I need to explain a little bit more. These are volunteer coordinators that work for specific nonprofit organizations. So that's their job, is to train, to manage volunteers. But again, it seems like it might be just like my issue. So I'm willing to just move on and talk about something that applies more to everybody else. But Teg, what you said is very cool too.
Hey, Tag, the resource you mentioned, the ambassador thing, is that something that you'd be willing to share broadly with everybody here?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'll follow up with you to get that. And the thing everybody gets on Friday is includes a link to a resources page. I think I mentioned that before. So we'll just post that up there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Tag. Appreciate it. Any other votes in on whether we continue or not? There's 1 no preference and 2 let's move along. Okay, 3 don't care, 2 say move along. Olga, thanks for playing. We're gonna move on to the next one. Scott, you're in a hot seat. We wrote, how do you manage your member roster? And then there's a follow-up, that little detailed question about, what field you collect.
Yeah, I'm just looking for best practices. I can tell you what doesn't work, but I want to know. I want to know. What are some of the best practices you guys have come up with for managing your member roster, so that you can send communications out to them and keep it up to date. So anything that the group can share on that would be very helpful.
I'll add one thing before everybody gets started, because I'm a one-off type person, and my own groups don't like what I like to do. And that is, I tried to make sure everything was up to date, and I would actually call people up and ask them and try to chase them down. And so I'm a little more aggressive than what most people are. So now I'll let you talk about the normal way.
My state organization, dealing with some 1,500 members, recently finally went to MailChimp. And we got the state members from our national organization. So you start with a list, and then you set it up. And by the way, it seems that we have a free version of that. And there's certain ways you have to do things. I don't think you can include attachments. So if there is an announcement, it goes into the body of the email. But that has helped considerably in reaching individual members, whereas before we would only have the president of each branch, who was then responsible for getting the material out. And you worked at it.
We used to use MailChimp as well, and there is a limit to the number of people in there.
Right.
We were never anywhere near as many as you, though, so that's good that you're able to do 1,500. And that's
Yes.
one of the things I used when I would get all the bounce back information. Those are the people I'd try to reach out to individually to see if they needed something.
And that's what we would do. Scott, are you part of an organization where people might have opted out of any emails?
No, not that I can think of. They usually, again, they would come to one of our presentations or meetings and provide information to us. And that's the second kind of thing. It's like, besides an email address, probably connect a phone number so that you can call them.
Oh.
I think that's another, again, they said, what fields you need to collect? You need their name, probably their company that they work at.
Yes.
But I was like, I'm just starting from scratch. I'm like, you start brainstorming, but what are the fields that you need to manage that stuff? And I think, an email and a phone number are really good.
Phone number, preferred phone, indicate whether it's a cell or a home phone, secondary phone. Since in your case, name of company they're associated with, and so on. I think you have to have that. And isn't that kept in a Excel program that you can then download the particular information. And by the way, in your case, wouldn't there be business email and personal email and preference?
That's a good, yeah, that's a good one, business and personal, yeah.
Yes. So yes, it takes time to put this together, but once you have, it is gold. And yes, it may need some people who are willing to call up 5 people at a time. We found people who actually never want anything. Do not send them anything, ever.
I think
I'm not sure I want those people in my membership if they never want to receive anything. I'm like,
I
well,
know,
then-
I don't get it either.
I think also, so then based on that too, I was going to say, not only do you need that information, that data, but you need to know what's their preferred method of communication,
Okay.
True.
right?
Good
I
point.
don't like that the Red Cross sometimes tries to call me. So I go and, because I'm a donor, just email me. That's it. Don't text me. Don't call me. And so I think that if you become less annoying, then that is a good thing.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes if you're written communications, like I want my name to be shown as I want it, as I have it right there. Olga Gonzalez Nichols. I don't want Olga Nichols, and I don't want Olga G. Nichols, and I don't
Right.
want Olga Gonzalez, right? So make sure that you talk about those preferences. I mean, that is, again, the less annoying you can be, the better.
Scott, is the organization you're with dues based?
Oh, just voluntary. I mean, people spend money to help us out, but they don't have to. So it's
Okay.
optional. It's optional dues. Let's say it that way.
Gotcha. So you do, well, the reason why I asked is because even as large as an organization as we have, I actually send a thank you to every single person when they renew. Not every time they send us a check, because I mean, there's not enough hours in the year. But what I have actually found is that LinkedIn has become the most valuable tool in the world, because the very first thing I do, you'd be amazed, even as the chamber, when we send an invoice for the dues, and then when we get the check back, how often the person that we sent it to still isn't actually with the company. And luckily, it gets paid many times, but it actually can still be the wrong person. So what I have actually found I've done over the last few years is when we get it, I just immediately I just have LinkedIn on my second screen and just double check that person actually still exists. Because a lot of times the person on the invoice isn't even there anymore. And then the light bulb goes off. We probably need to reach out to them. And that's one way we've actually used to keep our database up. Because when I got here, I mean, it was astounding how many people we were claiming we were reaching 8,000 people, and 2,000 of them didn't even exist anymore. Or at least they did, but they weren't anywhere closely associated with where we thought they were. So that's one way that you can bite it off in little bits instead of trying to go at a database like all in one big fell swoop, because it's impossible. Even with a small organization, it's just too tough. So that's one way to kind of follow through on it occasionally, just to see if people really are still where they are. If it's a civic league, it's sometimes a little bit harder because you're not dealing with companies. But I can tell you a couple of the association directors I work with, they do similar things with like Facebook, just to see because if they've moved to California, they're no longer in the neighborhood anymore. It's a quick way to figure out that, yeah, we can quit sending them that civic information because they're not around any. So
yeah,
but
well, and that's a good thing. Like the church I'm involved in, it's like, who is our reach? Do you want to keep people that have moved away because they can tune into the online service now? You know, that's a whole interesting kind of thing. And yeah, and somebody just said yesterday in the meeting, we need to update our church directory. I'm like, oh, really? Do you really need to do that? And what do you hope to accomplish from that? I didn't step up to say I was going to help with that task, because it's just messy. But we're having a problem with our Hampton Roads ISPI one. You know, who's come to a meeting the last 4 or 5 years? Who should we send out? And that's why I asked this whole question, because I just wanted some best practices on how to manage stuff. And again, I like your ideas of use LinkedIn, use Facebook, use those social networks to see if these people are, that's what I always do. I mean, I got an email from somebody about an organization. And I'm like, who is this guy? And I checked him up and it's like, oh, okay. He runs another organization. Okay. I'd be part of him. He's organized, that kind of thing, rather than is this a scam kind of thing? I'm always kind of wary, but that's always
one
a
of the
key thing.
problems. One of the problems I ran into, and this has to do with having a membership leader, that it changes. It's a position within your organization and
Yeah.
it changes and they do things a little different. And to add to that, we get an official membership list based on who's paid their dues and what have you. And of course, that'll change if somebody's a little late paying their dues, a couple months, they fall off the list. So whenever I was in charge of that sort of thing, I was like, okay, I'm maintaining a list, but I'm never deleting anybody unless I have a reason to delete them. And if somebody comes to a meeting and they're not a member, I add them into our list because I want them to come back and maybe one day they will become a member, but they're on my mailing list at least. So.
Great, thanks.
I have a quick question though. Managing the member roster, we have like a treasurer that collects the money. And well, we don't have a secretary at the moment. Is it okay or better to let other people add on, responsible people, not everybody, but like the treasurer to add on to that list? Or have you found that only one person should manage it?
I never had an issue with people adding to the list. It's things being removed that bother me. Now you're right, there might be an issue. Maybe we need to think about before you add one. Did we actually make sure the person said it was okay for them to be added to our list? But other than that.
One way you can do that is if, I know I've worked on a couple like sports associations, more civically style environments. And one thing that we did was that anytime we had someone bring us a business card, a name written on a napkin, whatever, the first thing we would do is we would actually send them an email that had a reply section. And sometimes it was simply just reply to this email. And that was the confirmation that, yes, I actually want to be in the database. So it literally took 10 seconds to do, but it ensured, like when I was with Courthouse Rec, it ensured that parent really actually wanted to be on that, because we didn't have any sophisticated stuff. I mean, like you were saying, it was an Excel spreadsheet and whatever email system they were using. So if anybody came to me with a name and said like, this guy wants to coach, we would just have this stock email, we'd send it out. And then that was the confirmation that, yeah, I actually want to get information from you guys.
Yeah.
No, that's a good thing, a good way to test your email list. And then the ones that don't respond or reply, you call them up and like, hey, and like, no, I don't want to be part of it. Okay, good. That's again, cleaning up that list. It takes time, but I like that.
Well, and if
know.
the original email referral gets kicked back, then you go back to the person that gave it to you and say, look, I tried it, it got kicked back. Do you have a
but it's not that hard to use Google to find somebody's email address. It's like, that's not, I mean, if they give you an email address that's missing a character, you're like, wait a second, I'm off on this one. I can find somebody that, or you can even just message them on LinkedIn. Sometimes people don't check their messages on LinkedIn. So, that's not exactly the most appropriate way to get a hold of people. But no, I think that's good. Another best practice. Thanks for that, Tage.
I do also agree with Trish in that deleting stuff is probably not a good idea. You need that historic data, even if people are wanting to drop off. You need to keep it there, because somebody might refer a name to you like, hey, have you, so-and-so might be interested. And if you have it in your historic data that they dropped off, not to reach out to them. And so you're not getting like that, I told you I don't want to hear from you, or no, for the second time, third, fifth, I'm not interested.
I haven't used Constant Contact or like MailChimp, but do those both allow you to like put people in pools or categories so that you can do what you were talking about, Olga, where
Yes.
it's
yeah.
there, but it's just inactive essentially?
Yes, it does. And also people with those, obviously, if you have those services and you're only doing email, then yes, people opt out also
Gotcha.
on their own.
MailChimp is one of the biggest drivers that I use. PDCHR is not a membership association, but for the most part, I kind of treat it like one. And a couple lessons learned I've seen along the way is, and Tag, I think you hit on this with that little introductory email, is you could, you want to minimize the barrier to continuing the conversation. So if you can just ask just to get started, can you confirm this is your name and email address, you might be done. As that conversation advances, then you can start, collecting what's the next set of necessary information. And using Tag, I think you asked about capabilities. So MailChimp and the others, in addition to the honoring someone's decision to opt out, it'll also track soft bounces and hard bounces, and will do some cleaning on your behalf. Whether or not that's to your dismay there, but if you don't lose the historical information, you may not be able to reach them directly anymore, at least through the system deliberately. But there's tons of stuff there. And like Suzanne, I use the free version, a couple forms, I integrate it with some other stuff. When you registered for today's event through Eventbrite, that flowed some information to the MailChimp. So I not only know that you registered, I also know if you showed up. I also know that you showed up for this thing in particular. So there's a whole track record right now on like Suzanne and Scott, everything they've done is captured in MailChimp. I do some broad analytics on that, not so much at the individual level, except for finding people for focus groups. Anyways, so our votes are split for.
One more comment. Can I make one more comment? I'll be quick. I promise. All I wanted to say was, I'm representing some organizations, and the membership chair from those organizations is not at this meeting today. And I think that says something, and that's something to remember with our organizations, is we want to make sure if we have that as a separate job, that whoever takes on that job has got a desire to do it well. Because y'all are talking about great topics that some of these guys never even care about. They just want to check off numbers. Done.
Yeah, don't manage by spreadsheet, manage by database. Any other thoughts on this, or shall we move along? You can give me a virtual thumbs up or thumbs down and continuing. So Addie, I saw a thumbs up to continue. No, there's a thumbs up to move along.
Move along, yeah.
Yeah, all right. We're done. All right, so one left. Hey, Olga, you're managing the spectrum here. You got the first one out the gate, and then you got a wrap up here. So Olga's, how do you balance communications?
Oh,
Too many emails, not enough. Go for it.
I think it's self-explanatory, but what I find is that there's like emails that go out to everybody because you want everybody to know about in your membership, but then there's others that are specifically for groups focused on families, serving families, or serving the environment, or whatever it is. And I don't know a magic formula, but I feel like you have to be sensitive to that. Too many, like my name everywhere, in their inbox is sometimes, it's not a good idea unless it's a one-on-one communication, right? They're asking a question. But anyway, I just wanted to ask about best practices.
My theory is you over communicate. If they don't want to get it, they're going to tell you. And I've got board members that are super active, great professionals, And the number of times that they come back and tell me, oh, I didn't see it, I didn't hear about it.
Right.
You over communicate, and if they want to opt out, let them opt out. Because the problem is, if you don't, the response is always going to be, well, I didn't know. So my opinion has always been, you over communicate. If you do it once a month, they think you do it twice. If you do it once a week, they think you do it every other day. I mean, they always think you're doing it more than you ever are. But if they want to opt out, they'll opt out. But my biggest frustration has always been that, well, we didn't know. Well, I mean, I can't communicate any more than I already am. So that's just my personal opinion. Some people feel like that's not bad, but I'll tell you, we just did a regional survey with our chamber membership. And it proved itself out from the standpoint that the ones who don't care or don't respond didn't respond to the survey to begin with. So there's your white noise. And the ones who did said we communicated perfectly. So, I mean, so we got to the people that always want to be reached out to, and the ones who don't ignored it anyway. So, I mean, that's why I say I'd rather just keep communicating as much as possible and do everything you can. Because the problem is, if you're under communicating, you're already starting from a point way down here. So that's just kind of my personal take on it.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that, Tig. You know, it's very easy for people to self-filter and stuff like that. And the I missed it thing, you know, part of my communication scheme for events is, you know, just so there's a notice that goes out to the email list 3 weeks before, and then there's a similar one that goes out 2 days before. And when they go out, they're very deliberately set to go out like Monday at 6:15 a.m. And then on my iPhone or my iPad, you know, comes back next day, says, hey, 84% of your recipients didn't open this. You know, and so one button push, it goes out again to the people who didn't open it, who didn't see it because it was like Monday morning. And I usually wait and I say, I'll do this like Tuesday at about 10:30 is when I'm going to do it. Catch them just as they're in that mid-morning slump. So yeah, I've you know, I don't think you can possibly over communicate enough. If you read anything by Patrick Lencioni, you'll know over communicate your messages. And you know, one of the topics that were raised earlier was, and I think Olga, you raised this, what's the preferred method of communication? So when you have too many emails, you know, I think there's an asterisk there, you know, /text /post to LinkedIn / you know, all those communication methods. So, you know, I think the more you can communicate over the greater number of channels always increases your probability of catching the right one. And if somebody is so offended that they can't possibly hit the delete key anymore, you don't want them anyways.
I think you need to manage it, though. You need to make sure that not everybody on your leadership committee is sending stuff out to everybody. You've got some kind of guidelines as to who's allowed to communicate to the entire membership group.
Yes, I'll
That's
agree
a
with
great
that.
point.
And everything you said, because we as an organization have an obligation to communicate the information that an interested member would want to have. We cannot disappoint that person who would want to know that this happened here and this is the latest there. But I will say it helps to be sure that whatever you send out is very pointed in the subject line and the first paragraph to convey what you need to convey. And yes, the control over who sends out, we've had a situation where there was someone sending out that we had to talk to. You can't do that. Guess what? That's a decision of the, in this case, a co-president as to what goes to all the members. That's not your decision. And
we
so,
had
yes,
somebody that we used to have to review some of the people who were sending stuff out because they made so many errors in their message that they were sending out.
I have to tell you, in my case, nothing goes out without the co-president's. It happens to be a co-president position, but the president of the state organization reviews everything. I mean, unless there's something standard, like a newsletter type conveyance, we review everything, every communication.
Yeah, it makes sense. When I was on the board several years ago as the VP of marketing for the local chapter of the Project Management Institute, one of the demands I put in place and somehow got away with was to also be the final point for any
Yes.
mass communications, because I wanted to ensure consistency of branding,
That's right.
grammar, and all that other stuff. So there are a couple noses bent out of joint, but I did good enough in the job that they eventually shut up and rolled over. And I don't know 8 years later if that's still the case. I'd like to think it is, but so that's why I'm not going to ask, because I can just assume that I set a great precedent.
Good.
So Suzanne and Addie, you are the the final two left on the island. Everybody else looked like they had to punch out at 1:15.
I have a question though before.
Yeah, sure.
So does the MailChimp, or is there another thing that will separate out? I don't remember who said it, but like to send things for people who have families that might be interested in children things, as opposed to just
Yes.
business from your
Yeah.
from your organization.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. MailChimp, without trying to get too technical, they have 3 different ways of tagging, of identifying groups of people.
Oh, okay.
There's groups and segments and tags. Groups is pretty much set up for people to self-identify. So that could be, hey, I'm interested in family stuff. I'm interested in development stuff. I'm interested in, getting rid of bounce houses, in my neighborhood or whatever it is, so they could opt into that. And then your email, can be structured to say, who am I sending this to? The whole email list, or just these select groups, or, just these groups and, some other criteria. It's pretty amazing what you can do. And again, at that free edition. So as I said before, this is what I use. So I mentioned there's an email that goes out Friday. That's already built. It's designed for those who are checked in. There's also another email that goes out on Friday that says, sorry, we missed you. And I don't have to put a name in it. It just simply says, oh, here's the people who are registered, but we're not tagged as being checked in.
Oh.
So, and for me, because I'm pretty much a one-man band, I automate as much as I can, because of time but really because of accuracy. I only have one authoritative data source for any piece of information that I care about. I will always go to MailChimp for these pieces. I will also, go to another database I use for authoritative information about like the events themselves from logistics and stuff like that. But I'm a data nerd from way back, so that's just going to happen.
Mark, I very much appreciate that you went through this, because I didn't handle the MailChimp myself. It was one of my colleagues. But let me point out the interesting thing that what Mark is saying. The free MailChimp goes up to 2,000 contacts. And what he's saying is, oh, you have all these options with the email. But where they get their money is when people are involved with branding and promotion. Then suddenly it's $9 or $10 a month with 500 contacts. So it's zero for 2,000 if you don't get into custom branding and things like that. If instead you're doing what Mark and I are doing, which is we just want the state finance officers, we just want the presidents, we just want people with such and such, as you say, however you've organized your email groups, right? Mm-hmm. They're very flexible on that.
Oh, good.
And so working within the 2,000 is very worthwhile.
only time I found that to be a limitation, my mail list is about, it's like 1,400, I think, something like that.
Yeah,
And the only time it's a limitation is if I screw up a campaign and I see it go out like with the wrong subject line, I can't immediately turn around because they also
Right.
say for free, you can't send more than 2,000 per day. So I've got to sit there and slowly burn for 24 hours and 1 minute before I
Good
can
point.
send out a corrective
Right.
notice.
Had to do that before.
point. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes.
Other thoughts,
No.
Suzanne, Addie?
No, I think it shows me that we're all facing, regardless of the type of organization, many of the same issues, but also there were many things said that, yes, that help confirm some things that I'll be able to bring back to people, saying, you've got to do coordinated programs with other, not just invite them, but do coordinated programs is probably one of the best ways for my organization to get new members and share things. So thank you very much. But there were numbers of things said that were so useful.
Oh, yeah. There's lots
Yep,
of good
thank
stuff.
you. This
Yes,
was great.
thank
Got
Thank
Mark.
you,
notes all over the
Patricia. Thanks,
page.
Patty.
Yes, thank you all. Mhm.
And Mark, yes.
Yes.
All right.
I appreciate it.
Well, you're abundantly welcome. And with this, I will grant you the gift of time. You have 7 minutes on me. Go forth
All
and
right.
do well.
Have
Take
a
care.
great day.
Bye.
All
I
right,
have
Addie.
to go
Okay,
back to
Suzanne.
watering the garden. Bye-bye, folks.
Bye.
All right, y'all take care.
You do too. Stay well, Mark.
Thank you very much.